By now you should have read this chapter and done the workbook. So what I'm going to do is simply go through these problems that need to be addressed and just talk about how together we may be able to do something about these problems, at least in our own sphere of authority, or as we said, responsibility. First of all, on page 73, many leaders are connecting to organizations believing that they are aligned apostolically. This is a problem. One of the problems here in the apostolic movement is that there are people and they get connected to an organization and they think, well, I have an apostolic covering. While these organizations are very needed, these organizations have purpose. There are many ministerial associations, for instance, or somebody's in your city, ministerial associations in your city, but there's ministerial fellowships and so forth that some of the more popular ministers may have. And those are good to be a part of. They're good to support. Most of them will charge dues of some kind. And being a part of these organizations, National Association of Evangelicals, perhaps, or something like that, or maybe even some loose confederation that has a name and maybe even has a president somewhere in an office. Joining those organizations are good. They can provide some of what we've talked about so far on these videos. But please don't misunderstand this and don't mistake an organization for an apostle. Because being connected to an organization doesn't mean you're connected to an apostle. Being connected to an apostle means you're connected to an individual. In other words, if somebody said, my pastor is such and such organization, you would look at them and say, but that organization is not a pastor. The pastor is a human being. No more can you say then that I'm connected with that organization. Good, I'm covered apostolically. You're not. You're not covered by an apostle. You're covered by an organization. While these organizations are good, they are not necessarily being connected to and covered by an apostle. I believe everybody needs to be connected to an apostle, and that apostle may have an organization. I have an organization called Soma. Soma is the Greek word for body. That's the name of this apostolic network. However, I am not the network. I am not the organization, and we try to put the organization behind the relational aspects of the people that are connected together. It's relationship. It's not about an organization. It's about being connected to a relationship. Okay, number 2. Secondly, many people are calling themselves apostles who are not. And this is a big problem in the apostolic movement. Now, when I think about these problems, you can probably think of a lot of different instances where somebody went out and got a business card and put the word apostle in there. I remember the first time that ever happened to me. I was an evangelist in a denomination. I was preaching a revival, and this fellow, I had no idea who he was. He came up to me and handed me a business card, and it had Apostle so-and-so, his name on it. And that was really strange to me in that day because I was under the impression there was 12 apostles, and Jesus never intended we should ever use the term, the title, or there would ever be apostles again. And so you can imagine when I saw his business card what I was thinking. But as I talked to this man, and I was kind of curious to see why he called himself an apostle, come to find out that there really was no one that he was leading. There was no one that was following him. There was no one that he was covering. There was nobody that was in association with him. It was interesting. He just said that God said that he was an apostle. So the first thing that he did, he went out and got himself some business cards and began to pass them out that I'm an apostle. I said earlier that no one should ever call themselves an apostle. You should not call yourself an apostle until you bear the fruit of an apostle. You shouldn't call yourself an apostle until those that follow you affirm that you're an apostle, and those that cover you affirm that you're an apostle. So that affirmation comes from two directions, from those following and those that lead you. And because of that, then that affirmation of your gift, there's no problem that you should use that title. But one of the problems, and this is the problem I'm specifically addressing here, is that there are people using that term that are not. And you could probably think of a few. And it really does the movement a great injustice. Okay, it's like when somebody believes that they want to be, and here's my sports illustrations again, football illustrations again. So if you're not familiar with American football, maybe you don't totally relate with these stories, but it would be like somebody that says, I'm the best quarterback in the NFL, or I'm the greatest quarterback ever. And you say, well, what team do you play for? And they say, well, I don't play on a team. You say, well, who's your coach? I don't have a coach. Okay, well, who are your players? I don't have players. God just said I'm a great quarterback, so I went out and printed me a business card. And they go around calling themselves Apostle so-and-so. You should never do that. Not until those who follow you affirm you, those who cover you affirm you, and you have a commissioning, then you're an apostle. Just like you're not a pastor if you don't lead anybody, you don't shepherd anybody. So, people who use that title, but are really not, those are hindering the movement. But interesting now, look at number 3. The third problem I identify in the book is on page 77. True apostles refusing to use the title are allowing pretenders to hijack the ministry. Now, just like I said, one problem is that those who are not apostles say they are. This problem is connected with it. Those who are apostles say that they're not. And I see a lot of people that they refuse to come close to the word apostle. Now, I know that there are legitimate apostles. I know one in particular, he'll use the title bishop. And I asked him about that one time. He said, in my environment, the people that are in my sphere, in my city, if I use the word apostle, they're not ready for that. So I have found that the term bishop, they understand. And when I'm introduced as a bishop, it opens up doors for me that being called an apostle is not. At the same time, this individual also affirms his apostolic gift, affirms his apostolic calling, teaches on the apostolic, but chooses rather to use the title bishop. Again, I'm not about titles, but on the other hand, I would say this, that when apostles who are apostles refuse to be called apostles, that's a problem. Think about this. What if there was a man that taught people every week in a building, and he shepherded them, loved them, and led them, and when the people came up to him and said, oh, Pastor so-and-so, what if he said, oh no, don't call me pastor. I'm not your pastor. Don't call me pastor, for goodness sake. Just call me Mark. Question I want to ask you is, if he refused or she would refuse to be called a pastor, wouldn't that kind of hinder and confuse the people that relate to them? What if your children came up to you and said, Daddy, and you said, hey, don't call me Daddy, call me Mark. I'm not your daddy. Wouldn't that confuse your children? What if you were on a sports team and you're the quarterback, and they said, hey, quarterback. Oh, don't call me quarterback. I'm not the quarterback. No, I'm not the quarterback. I'm just the guy that gets the ball when it's snapped and throws the passes. But don't call me quarterback. Or what a police officer said, hey, don't call me police. What if your mayor said, oh, don't call me mayor? Think about what kind of confusion it leads to when people who are doing something refuse to be called that. That's exactly what's going on in the apostolic movement now. We have apostles who maybe don't bear the title on their business cards, and I understand that. But you still, if you're doing the work of an apostle, you still have to let people know, I am your apostolic leader. I'm your apostolic connection, your apostolic covering. I am an apostle. Now, just like I'm a pastor, and I tell people I'm a pastor, I want the people in my church to know I'm a pastor because it helps them understand how to relate with me. I may or may not use pastor on my business card, stationery, or even insist that people call me pastor. But I can tell you this, that the people, even if they don't use the title, they understand who I am in their life. They have to, and they understand it because I taught on it. It's the same thing with apostles. You have to let people understand that you are an apostle, and quit running from that word. Quit denying it. And I know what was going on. What they do is they see the pretenders. These guys, the second problem I identified was people who are not apostles saying they are. So the true apostles see them and they say, ooh, I don't want to be connected with those guys, so leave me out of it. The problem is, the more we run from that title, the more the pretenders hijack it. That's a problem. We've got to address that problem and fix it. The final problem that I identify is on page 78. The fourth issue that needs to be addressed in the apostolic movement is the use of control in many apostolic networks, and I believe that's a big problem. I think even in parts of the world, there are some geographical regions of the world I've been to where control is exerted more than in other places. A lot of times where I go to nations where they have a history of dictatorships, it seems that the model of leadership that they've seen politically is kind of the same model that's adopted by the church until The leaders of the church become very dictatorial. And that's a problem in the apostolic movement. In many nations, and to an extent in all nations of the earth, control is an enemy. Undue control and manipulation from leaders is an enemy that will destroy what God wants to do. It's got to be addressed. We've got to learn what true servant leadership means. It means we don't lead for our own benefit. We lead for the benefit of those that follow. We do what we do for them. If you're an apostle, life ain't about you. If you're an apostle, it's a death sentence for you. If you got great authority, it means you have less rights. You don't have the right to do what you want to do all the time. You don't have that right anymore. You've accepted a place of responsibility in God's kingdom. Now you got to lead for God's sake and for God's children. And when we stand before God and judge, He's going to look at me. He's going to look over my shoulder and see about the sheep that He gave to me, those sheep that I'm responsible for. That's what leadership means. I'm not here to control anybody. The fact is, I can't even control myself sometimes. I'm not going to control anybody else. We've got to move beyond the childishness of control and manipulation and move into a greater realm of leadership authority, where leadership authority is not imposed at all. Leadership authority means I take responsibility, and those that follow do so willingly. And I am there not to lead for my benefit, not to make life better for me, but to make it better for them. That's what true leadership is all about. So my prayer for you, my prayer for the apostolic movement, is that we understand these problems, address and fix these problems so that we can be everything that God wants us to be.